Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Decades with Joe E. Kramer.
It's 9 o'clock.
Hey everybody, this is Ivan from Men Without Hats. Hi everyone, this is Russell Hitchcock of Air Supply.
I'm all out of love. I'm so lost without you. I know you were right, believing for so long.
Hey everybody, it's Robert Mason from Warren.
Heaven isn't too far away. Love should do it every day.
And you're listening to Decades. You're listening to Decades.
Let's all hang out with Joey Kramer on Decades.
This is the Decades Artist Spotlight. Now, here's Joe E. Kramer with this week's artist.
We are on a Decades Artist Spotlight, and tonight's the Thompson Twins. You remember them well. A lot of hits in the 1980s and even into the 1990s. Tom Bailey is the founder and lead singer. Got a brand new album called Science Fiction. He was nice enough to sit down with me and talk for a little while a couple weeks back, and I'm going to play you that interview tonight. The Decades Artist Spotlight tonight is with the one and only Tom Bailey of the Thompson Twins. We're going to play a bunch of stuff off his new record, Science Fiction. But of course, their biggest hit, the Thompson Twins, Hold Me Now. We'll talk to Tom Bailey next, right here, the Decades Artist Spotlight.
I have a picture pinned to my wall, an image of you and of me, and we're laughing with love at it all. Look at our life now, all tattered and torn. Fuss and we fight and delight in the tears that we cry until dawn. Oh, hold me now. Oh, hold my heart. Stay with me. Let loving start. Let loving start. You say I'm a dreamer. We're two of a kind. Both of us searching for some perfect world we know we'll never find. So perhaps I should leave here, yeah, and go far away. But you know that there's nowhere that I'd rather be than with you here today.
is the Decades Artist Spotlight with Joe E. Kramer. This week's artist.
It's another Decades Artist Spotlight, and tonight I am thrilled to have singer-songwriter, producer, musician, and founder of Thompson Twins, Mr. Tom Bailey, is with us in the Spotlight tonight. How you doing, Tom?
I'm very good. How are you?
First, you have a brand new album, which is called Science Fiction, which I want to get into. But first, it's been a long journey that has brought you back to pop music, because you haven't gone anywhere, and people might say, where's Tom Bailey been for the last 20 years? But you really haven't stopped, but it's all come back to this and coming back into the pop music genre.
That's right. I mean, I have been doing other things musically, and that's why some people who, are just looking at the charts don't see any sign of me for all that time. But I've been very busy, in fact. But it took a while, actually. I needed to get away from pop music and attend to other creative challenges, but also to kind of clear my head and make it interesting again. And I must say, I think I almost left it too long, because now I'm kind of back into it. I'm thinking, wow, this is the most fascinating thing. There's something about the writing of a pop song that really turns me on creatively. So.
And it is simplistic when you think about it. I mean, you've written a lot of things, you've produced a lot of things, but writing a good pop song, I mean, you're good at it. So does it come easy?
Well, no, I think it's actually a very difficult thing to write a good pop song. It's deceptively difficult, and that's partly because you have to be amazingly concise. For example, what can I say? One of the other projects that I do is dub music. Now,
right.
In dub, I can do a 10-minute intro and no one complains.
Right.
But with a pop song, it's got to be done and dusted in 3 minutes 15 seconds.
Otherwise,
it won't get played on the radio.
By the way, I was saying it's easy for you, not it's easy in general, but you seem to make it somewhat easy to write. I mean, the songs that Thompson Twins have done, I mean, Hold Me Now, Doctor, Doctor, You Take Me Up, King for a Day, Lay Your Hands on Me. My favorite, by the way, of all time was If You Were Here. And a lot of people have heard that song in the movie Pretty in Pink. How did that come about? Because that was from an earlier album, and then there it was in this movie, Pretty in Pink.
Yeah, well, it was one of the reasons. Actually, it wasn't Pretty in Pink. It was
16 Candles. I'm
16
sorry,
Candles.
16 Candles.
That's right. So I take great pleasure singing that song. I've even added two new extra verses for the live rendition of that. And over here in the UK, people didn't see that film so much. So it didn't didn't become so celebrated as a song, because it was never a single or anything. But in the States, people love it, so it's a great pleasure to sing that song.
It's funny when I think Pretty in Pink and 16 Candles, because Pretty in Pink had a song by the Dream Academy in it. So it was like the same, it was the same kind of sound at that point. So how did, so you started performing live again in 2014. You were gone. How long was it since you actually performed these Thompson Twins songs? It was over 20 years from what I've read.
Yeah, I think someone told me it was a 27-year gap.
Wow.
So that's pretty amazing, and I certainly wasn't counting the time, but in fact, I'd pretty much closed down any hope of doing it again. I decided I just never wanted to. But I accidentally crossed the line. I was working with someone on their pop record and enjoyed it so much. And then about 4 years ago, Howard Jones said that he wanted to go and tour in America, and was I interested in going with him? And it just seemed like the right time suddenly to kind of take a retrospective view and say, okay, let's look at those old songs again and see if we can kind of not only make them interesting for ourselves, but kind of work on contemporize them so that they're interesting for a new audience as well as the old fans. And it all happened very quickly and very easily. So here we are. And then, of course, the next thing was, okay, what about writing some new songs?
Right. Well, that's always the next question, because nowadays it's so different now compared to what it was back in the 80s and even in the 90s, releasing an album, because people aren't buying them like they used to. You would sell 1 million copies back in the 80s, and they'd say, oh, well, that's not good enough. Now you sell 30,000 copies, and people are, you're happy with that release because people just aren't buying them.
That's right, because people listen to music in a different way.
Right.
Their attention span is for a track in the background rather than grabbing an album and going home and listening to the whole thing. So, the world has moved on, and we can't turn back time. I think my main criticism of the way things have changed is that the kind of rebelliousness of rock and roll has lost
its
way a little bit, And you hear too many songs now just about, my latest relationship and how it's going to, get me some likes on a social media platform
right.
or something. And that to me is not what I got into contemporary music for. I think it's got this great ability to, the potential at least, to change the world, because it's the thing that everyone listens to. So it's a wasted opportunity in a way for it to be vacuous. So that's my mini moan, my complaint about the way things are. But I'm lucky because I can kind of call on the memory of that and evoke it again in my audience.
And was it amazing the first time you hit the first couple of notes of one of those songs? The response, I mean, obviously nowadays the response to the music from that generation is incredible. Were you surprised how people never forgot?
Well, absolutely. I mean, it was even before I hit the stage. I remember my first comeback concert was a secret little thing in a little club before we did the big festival the next day. And I was waiting backstage to go on, and the audience was already singing the song. And from that moment, I knew it was going to be okay.
It's got to be great. I mean, you're talking almost 40 years later, and people are still singing and know the words to "Hold Me Now." So it's got to be a great feeling.
Yeah, and for me, that's a big emotional moment. I've got to say, it's not just something I observe coldly. I'm just always amazed. In fact, we came back to this. I'm in London at the moment. We came back over here to just do one show, a big festival here. And I sang "Hold Me Now" to 40,000 people. They were all singing along. And there was a moment when I thought to myself, this is as good as it gets, really.
Right.
This is just the most amazing experience.
And when you came back,
a sea of people.
When you came back, you started performing live, and then you got Best Live Show. You were voted by was the Classic Pop magazine as the best live show. I think that was in 2015.
That's right.
So I mean, you just got right back up there, and nothing seems to have changed.
Well, if anything, we added the things that we weren't able to do back in the day. So dedicated video is a big part of what we do now. And back in the day, we didn't have that. So it's become even more visual in a sense.
And before I talk about science fiction, I'm going to get to that in a second here. I got to bring up Live Aid. I mean, Live Aid was like the 80s Woodstock. I mean, obviously not the same impact, but 100,000 people at JFK, hundreds of millions of people watching it on MTV, and you backed up Madonna on her set, and then Madonna came out and backed you up. Nile Rodgers was out there, Steve Stevens was out there, and you did an incredible version of Revolution, which I play on my show because I've always liked that song, but it was incredible. I watched it again last night, and the energy, it was weird seeing Madonna back. I mean, she was just basically starting out.
That's right. Well, I sometimes attempt to joke that I gave her a big break in her career.
You jump-started her career. She would have never been as successful if she wasn't on stage with you back at Live Aid.
I don't think I get very far claiming that to her now, but it was an interesting moment, and it was a very friendly thing. It was just one of those easy things where we kind of swapped backing vocals, it was kind of a big memory for me. But of course, you're right. It was it was the Woodstock of its era, and in a way, it's difficult to follow through after that. I think that there was something about the innocence of the 80s that ended that day,
right?
And the world has changed.
Now you have a brand new album, which is why we're here talking about Science Fiction's the name of the new album. First solo. I'm not going to say your first album because it's not your first. You've put out a lot of music, but your first solo pop music release. And why did it take so long to decide you're going to put out you touched on the pop music before, but why all of a sudden now you said, hey, I'm going to put out a CD full of pop music. That's it.
Well, it's honestly just a question of one thing leading to another, because I've been out singing the old songs. I felt that was great, and I was really enjoying it, but it wasn't quite enough in the sense that I wanted it to be a contemporary creative challenge as well. So the next thing is you write songs, and then suddenly you're looking at enough songs to make an album, so it's like an obvious thing to do. I kind of I resisted it for a while, because I thought, when I said I'd sing some of the old songs, I never signed up for making
right. That's work.
Yeah. Well, it's not only that, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to go there creatively. But again, as soon as I got my foot in the door and started writing, it was just too seductive, or I enjoyed it too much to say no. So there you are. And you know, I'm the kind of person who writes 25 songs, throws 15 away, and keeps the best 10.
And I think the most amazing thing is that it wasn't done in a studio. You basically did this album in hotel rooms across around the world on your laptop computer.
Right. Well, I mean, that's the gift of modern technology, isn't it? Because we have studios and laptops now, and anyone can do that if they wish. So it's not necessary to kind of put your life on hold and go into a studio for three months to make a record. You can just do it in between everything else that you're doing. And I do travel a great deal, so it's true. A lot of it gets done in the back of a bus or a hotel room or even backstage in some places. And that way I can accumulate the hours that it takes to make a good record.
The game of love is written in a book, and only lonely people take a look. You can read about our fall from grace, but your words are floating free in outer space. Science fiction is all you ever read. Science fiction is all you seem to need. Whoa. The latest title's always on your rhythm always moves your hips, and you're dressed the part, your clothes are all rage. If only I could tear you from the page. Science fiction is all you ever read. Science fiction is all you seem to need. I'd like to make you mine, but you travel in time. Science fiction is all you ever need. Well, your obsession takes you far away, but I just want you here with me today. Science fiction is all you ever read. Science fiction is all you seem to need. Science fiction is all you ever read. Science fiction is all you seem to need.
It is the Decades Artist Spotlight. Tom Bailey is with us from the Thompson Twins.
This week's Decades Artist Spotlight continues. Now, here's Joe E. Kramer with this week's artist.
We are in the Decades Artist Spotlight. Spotlight. Tom Bailey of the Thompson Twins. You just heard one of his new songs off his album, Science Fiction, the title track, Science Fiction. We'll be playing something else off that album coming up. Plus, our second part of our interview with Tom Bailey. We're going to talk about some different tracks on that album. And, of course, what's going on now. He's on tour with Culture Club and the B-52s. That and more when the Decades Artist Spotlight returns right here. It is Decades every Saturday night live around the world at Decades with JoeEKramer.com. We got all the links there, plus the RiverNEPA.com. More Decades with Tom Bailey of the Thompson Twins coming up next.
This is the Decades Artist Spotlight.
Northeast PA's The River.
I saw you there, just standing there, and I thought I was only dreaming, yeah. I kissed you then, and then once again. You said you would come and dance with me. Dance with me across the sea.
is the Decades Artist Spotlight. That is the Thompson Twins from 85. Doctor, it's Joey Kramer. Let's get back to our second part of our interview with Tom Bailey of the Thompson Twins.
This week's Decades Artist Spotlight continues. Now, here's Joe E. Kramer with this week's artist.
It is Tom Bailey of the Thompson Twins on the Decades Artist Spotlight. Now, let's talk about a few of these songs. Science fiction. I'm going to go about a couple of my favorites here. I can't, obviously we don't have hours and hours to talk about every one, but science fiction, I hear that song, and it sounds like you're talking about a girl. Is that true?
Well, yeah. I mean, I sing it from the point of view of someone whose partner is so obsessed with science fiction that I can't get their attention. And I guess you could substitute, the internet or your phone or the TV screen or whatever,
right?
The thing that drags people's attention away from you. So it's really it's a song of jealousy, really. But the thing is, the bigger metaphor is really about how we turn away from science in favor of fiction. In other words, we turn away from the truth in favor of what we imagine to be true. And that's like a human condition. And so I like to think that the song is really about that.
And this album seemed to have a theme, too, which I've noticed.
Yes, and about 3 or 4 songs in was when I wrote science fiction, and I realized that in a way was the umbrella concept. There's a lot of stargazing, a lot of astronomical and cosmological terms of phrase are being used. So I think my wife said, half your songs have got words about the sky and looking upwards rather than downwards, and I thought, well, that's really an interesting observation, and I'll stick with it.
What Kind of World? That's another one of the songs I noticed on the album. Now, I read that it's about David Bowie's death. Now, talk a little bit about that.
Well, I just happened to be writing that song when the news came through, and like a lot of people, I suddenly realized quite powerfully how deeply I'd been influenced by him, by his presence, just as an experimental writer and performer of pop music. He was very hit and miss in a way, Bowie, and that's because he didn't follow the same kind of formula to success all the time. He always, I think, he once expressed it that when you're in your comfort zone in the water, just wade out that little bit further, and that's where the best place to be is. When you're just out of depth. And it's true that when there's a potential for things to go wrong, that's when I think the interesting stuff happens.
And you always talk about your encounter with David Bowie also.
Well, I only met him once, and that was when we played a gig together. And it was amazing, actually, because it was a big festival stage in a football stadium in Scotland. And he arrived by car, which drove onto the stage. And he got out of the car, walked to the microphone, and started singing. I happened to be there, so I just kind of exchanged nods with him, and that was it. And at the end of the show, while the music was still echoing around the stadium, he was back in the car and drove away. And I realized that's a measure of the kind of insane level of stardom that he'd reached, that he simply didn't have time to talk to everyone.
And I don't know if that's good or bad. I mean, I read that you like to talk to the fans. You like to, you like to be backstage. So, I mean, I guess it's good and bad.
Well, I am the kind of person who likes to get to the show 4 hours early, hang out, get a sense of the atmosphere as it builds up, speak to some fans if it's possible. But also, there's something incredibly exciting when you do a festival and you arrive and there's no sound check, the crowd is already there, there's something already happening, and you just have to walk on and perform. So sometimes that is a way of getting very excited about what you do.
You have the song Shooting Star, one of my favorites on the album. The song seems to all the songs seem to be looking up at the sky. And then you have a song called Shooting Star, which again is one of the songs that stood out to me on the CD.
Mm. Well, largely it's about this thing that, we all like people to be outrageous and say they're great fun, and especially, when there's drinking and drugs involved. And of course what they're doing is often wrecking their lives in order to entertain you. And then when they finally get themselves together and everyone says, oh, they're no fun anymore. I think that's like an incredibly difficult thing, to be the shooting star that burns up in front of everybody. And we have to question whether it's time to give people space to just become a regular human being like the rest of us.
And I guess the last two songs I want to mention, like I said, I can't go over all of them, but If You Need Someone, which is another of my favorite, and probably my favorite song on the whole CD, which I have played on my show, is Bring Back Yesterday. So talk a little bit about these two songs.
That's interesting. Well, what was the first one you mentioned?
The first one was If You Need Someone, and then I said my favorite was Bring Back Yesterday.
If You Need Someone, in a way, came about as a homage to Nile Rodgers. A couple of years ago, I was lucky enough to play a gig with him. He invited me to join his Fold Festival, and we did a couple of songs together. And it just reminded me what an amazing musician he is, and how uniquely infectious his particular ideas are. So I was really just nodding in his direction when I wrote If You Need Someone. It had that kind of disco feel, at least as a starting point. Bring Back Yesterday is more a song of regret. I think as the lyric says, you have this valuable drink in the glass, but if you spill it on the floor, it's gone forever. And so it's saying, that we must take every opportunity that lies in front of us, and not squander them. So that's the kind of deep meaning of the song.
And the album is by the way, Science Fiction. It's available right now. It's very, very good CD. I listened to it a few times. Like I said, they're from some of my favorites. And Bring Back Yesterday is a song that I've been playing. And you're, of course, on tour. You're still out with Culture Club and B-52s, right?
That's right.
And that's going to be amazing.
We're halfway through a long North American haul, and it's going incredibly well. I mean, partly because, let's face it, that's quite a good lineup.
Yeah,
Culture Club B-52, and so I'm very pleased to join that. There's a feeling that people expect to have a good time when they see that list of bands, and it's true. The B-52s, of course, are like American national treasures, and Culture Club and Boy George are on top form, being amazing every night. So it really is the best thing.
And it seems like you're doing bigger, not so much bigger like production-wise, but you're doing longer tours, larger tours than you were doing back in the 1980s.
Yes, it almost is that way. I think we have a total of 80 concerts between the start of this tour and the end of November. And that has to be more than we used to do back in the
Right.
day.
It's incredible. I was looking at the dates, and I mean, you're out there continuously. It's not like it's a side job for you. You're out there all the time.
Well, sometimes we get into situations where we're only playing at weekends, especially if it's a festival run. And the problem with that is great fun, and you see a lot of people, but you never really get fully played in. It's only when you're doing 5 or 6 shows a week that you become so well kind of practiced and kind of slick at it, I guess, that you find yourself able to start taking risks. When you're not sure that things are going to go okay, then you're kind of nervously trying to make it right all the time. But when you become confident enough that you know what you're doing, then suddenly the platform emerges for you to start fooling around with things and make it risky again. And that, for me, is the magic moment.
And I guess the last question I want to ask you, and this goes along with the whole science fiction theme, if Tom Bailey right now from 2018 was to go back to 1982, 1983, and say something to the Tom Bailey of the 80s, what advice would you give him?
Well, I don't know if I'd presume to give a younger man advice. But the thing is, what you don't realize is that great songs last for a lifetime, and so they're the things that live on even after you die, to put it bluntly. And so they're the treasures, and you should always put your work into those. Make them as good as they possibly can be.
Absolutely. I agree with that. And a lot of artists, they don't want to play the hits, and they don't really, it's got to be hard even for you. You go out there, you have a new album, you want to work some of those new songs in, but these songs mean so much for so many people. You basically have to give them what they want.
Yeah, well, we have to check those boxes for people, but I figure, if we do that, then we earn permission to play a few new ones as well. The longer the set we have, the more new ones we can fit in. But, you're absolutely right. When you're in front of a big crowd and they're singing along with the hits, and you're playing well and the band is on fire, then there's a moment when you think, this is as good as it gets. And
right.
We're being paid to do it as well.
We're on a Decades Artist Spotlight. We're here, of course, from Thompson Twins. Mr. Tom Bailey has a brand new album, which is called Science Fiction, which you can get right now. Tom, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and I thank you so much for taking some time out tonight.
It's a pleasure, and I'm looking forward to being out your way and meeting everyone. Hello, this is Tom Bailey from the Thompson Twins, and you're listening to Decades with Joe Kramer.
Seems like yesterday I thought I heard you say we would be together forever and a day. But time has drifted past. Yeah, it should have happened fast.
Tom Bailey. Bring Back Yesterday on Decades.
This week's Decades Artist Spotlight continues. Now, here's Joe E. Kramer with this week's artist.
On the Decades Artist Spotlight with Tom Bailey tonight, Bring Back Yesterday. Science Fiction is the name of the new album. You can check it out, Amazon, iTunes, all of the usual spots, in stores, on tour with the B-52s and Culture Club. And they're doing a lot of dates, so check that out. Our next Decades Artist Spotlight will be coming up in a few weeks. I'm trying to see what I'm going to do for Halloween. It all depends on how my jaw goes and whether I'm going to need a week or 2 weeks away from here. There'll be no Decades next week. We should be back on the 27th, but time will tell. So the next Spotlight will be with Billy Childs, Brittany Fox, and that'll be coming up at a date to be determined. Meanwhile, more Decades coming up. That I can guarantee you. Men Without Hats, new edition, Save Ferris, and a lost track from Mr. Garth Brooks. Did one a few weeks back, and we'll do another one tonight. All about having friends, you know? This is Decades on the River 105 and 103.5. Hang on.